Real life.
Superpowers.
If you want to get rich, well, I wish I knew. I don't think there's a formula for this. Otherwise, everybody would have done it, right? I think in the tech scene, which I know more than others, usually you can become much richer by joining the right company at the right stage. So if you look at companies who sort of raised some money from good VCs, kind of, in sort of the VC jargon, it might be a seed round, A round, sort of like early stage, and you join them at that time and you get a nice package of stock or options or whatnot, and the company is successful. You still, like, if somebody's raised 2 rounds from a leading VC, they probably get a good chance, like one of 3 or 4 to be successful. You're not going to be a billionaire out of this, but you can get maybe, I don't know, if you're successful, maybe $1 million, which is actually a good thing. And then maybe after you get one of them is not like rich, but it's like it gives you the economic safety that I think most people are looking for.
Hey folks! In this episode, we speak with Eilon Reshef, co-founder and chief product officer at Gong. He's a serial entrepreneur. After successfully selling his previous e-commerce startup Webcollage, he went on to co-found Gong, a SaaS solution that, as they like to describe themselves, unlocks reality to help people and companies reach their full potential. Gong is growing at a rapid rate and is very well known across the sales and marketing industry, having acclaimed several awards and doing marketing work that simply can't be ignored. There's a lot to learn from Eilon's professional and entrepreneurial journey. Enjoy your listen.
Real life.
Superpowers.
Up in the sky, it's a bird. It's a plane.
Gentlemen, we can rebuild him. We have the technology.
It's alive!
Real life.
Superpowers.
Eilon, welcome to Real Life Superpowers.
Hello, thanks for having me.
So Gong are like the celebrities of the marketing and sales industry.
We're doing our best to grow. I'm glad the sort of name kind of precedes us. That's a good thing.
Do you remember a point where you sort of felt like suddenly the word is spreading?
It's never one point. It's when you start a company, initially you don't have any customers, and suddenly there's 10, there's 50, there's 100, and initially people don't know about you, and then they know about you a little bit more and a little bit more. So it's a journey. I don't think there's one point where you say, hey, everybody knows Gong. People still don't know who we are in many cases, and it's always better to be more known and more successful than the other way around. So I think it's a gradual process.
And how did you end up founding the company?
So it's an interesting story. I had my previous company. This is my second startup. So previous one we had sold back in 2013, and then I kind of stayed with them, took a sabbatical, and I was kind of doing nothing for a year, which I recommend everybody, by the way. And then I met Amit, who's my co-founder and CEO, and he left a company called Sisense at the time, and he was running that company, and they were running into issues where they did not understand why sales were not succeeding. So he was like, well, you got to figure a way to find the answer, right? And I was in sabbatical. I was doing machine learning and AI that was popular at the time, starting at the time. So we kind of got together and we said, hey, let's solve it using technology. Let's give people a system that they can just understand what's really going on versus, what people are reporting. So that's the genesis of it all.
And, it's okay if you don't want to answer that, but you sold the company and you decided you're taking a year off. And was it very clear to you after you sold it that you're going to keep working and initiating, or did you feel like you need to, or was it more of a passion? Were you able to not continue working if you wanted to?
No. When we sold the previous company, it wasn't a huge success. I mean, I got a little bit out of it. So no, I definitely had to find new work. I took a sabbatical. It was a long run, more than 10 years. So I needed some time off. I could afford a year off. And then I think my preference was to start a new company. I tried many things. I was like incubating, not starting, like, a couple of 2 or 3 different ideas, talking with people, of course, not myself, just in terms of like maybe do something together. But at the end of the year, I was very bored. So at some stage, you're like, okay, what am I going to do with the day? You kind of wake up, have coffee at 10 a.m. What do you do now? So I was going to I had a few job offers at the time, and I was considering going back to have a normal life, which is, be a employee somewhere. Heading products was kind of the main one that people reached out to me for. And then I met Amit, and I was like, yeah, of course, I'd rather do something that, I can start. It's still fun. It's like more fun. It's not even just like you control more things when you're a co-founder.
Were you ever an employee?
Oh, of course. I mean, yeah. Previous company I started, many years ago, but before that, I was working with 2 or 3 companies.
Were you ever a good employee?
I never got fired, so I guess it's okay. I mean, I once I was going to quit, and I convinced the employer to sort of like terminate me for obviously kind of for kind of whatever the severance reasons. But I was like, yeah, I was yeah. So I wasn't maybe not good, but at least not bad enough to get fired. So.
Taking it a sabbatical. You're like, what is your day? How do you get something in motion? Because usually, if you have motion, that's like as an entrepreneur, it's easy. When you don't have motion, you said that cup of coffee. Like, who makes that cup of coffee for you?
Well, first of all, there is a coffee place next to my apartment. By the way, Tarantino sits there right now. At the time, he wasn't still married to his Israeli wife, so I was there alone, or without Tarantino anyway. And they knew me at the time because it was like I was there maybe 3-4 times a week. So a lot of like meeting other people, potentially kind of dating for co-founding, and each potential co-founder that you meet is like might have an idea or a domain expertise. I spend time kind of researching more and stuff. I still have this folder of like things I researched back in 2014. Not good ideas, by the way. Some might be, but most are not. So you look at the industry. Sometimes you kind of date somebody for a few weeks because you want to like explore stuff. Sometimes it works, not for personal reasons, like the idea doesn't work, and then I don't know, some things don't work. And then the other things, I took a deep learning course in Tel Aviv University. That was fun. I just like mingled a little bit to kind of know the industry better. That was like when I was co-founder, I didn't have time. I was kind of busy working. So just like meeting VCs, meeting other entrepreneurs to sort of know the ecosystem a little bit more. I was part of a group of parents who started a school. That's fun, right? Starting a school is fun. So lots of stuff. And then I had more time for the kids. I mean, yeah, more coffee.
What school?
It's a school next to my apartment. It's called the Yehuda Maccabi School. It's still considered a good school. It was kind of a little bit innovative at the time, but of course it wasn't our school. It was the municipality school. But we were part of the group of parents who kind of affected how it's being kind of set up. So
That's an interesting hobby.
it is. I'm not going to do it again. Trust me.
And okay, so if you dated so much, why did you sleep with Amit, so-called? Like, why was he a keeper?
Pete, before I even met him, he was considered a very good, like a super talent. I mean, it's sort of one of the best go-to-market people in Israel. Certainly a lot of expertise and experience. And I think he also had a great idea for a new software product that I liked because I like working with salespeople. I love B2B software, business-to-business software, meaning selling to businesses, not just to consumers. So it was the right time. Again, I was at the end of the year, so I was bored. And he was looking for a co-founder, so I think all things kind of came together very nicely.
And like so you decided to be together, and like how did that work? Because you had no clients. You said that like we had no clients. So like what's the first thing you did to start? Like did you sit in the coffee house and start planning it? Like what was the first thing that got in motion?
Yeah, so I think there's 2 parallel tracks. One is, I mean, maybe a few things. One is just dating, right? You just like you get to know the person a little bit, and you want to see that you can actually start a business with them, right? It's kind of sounds obvious, but it isn't, right? It's like it's a not knowing people thing. It always takes time. The other thing is sort of like doing a little bit of coffee talk so that we can kind of see what the idea looks like, where are we taking it, blah, blah, blah. And unfortunately, he does not live in Tel Aviv. So I had to go to places I've never visited before, like, I don't know, Kenyon Renanim. Like all those places that is somebody in Tel Aviv, you don't even know which, just Waze, you can just Waze them. And then I hate like shopping malls. And this dating scene was the only time in my life where I actually visited different shopping malls. Like, again, not before, not after, nothing. And then the third part is, I think, probably the most important one is once you get the hang of it, is sort of start working with the market. So you call a few like people in networks, like, hey, you could be a potential customer. If we build this, is this something that interests you? What are your feedback? So both on the market, the need, and then technology, because Gong is a pretty sophisticated like AI-based stuff. So it's like, is it even feasible, right? We started by understanding conversations. What is the AI for call transcription, for AI natural language understanding? So both on the customer side and on the technology side, just making sure that the thing actually works, makes sense. And then later on, when you actually start it, it's like, raise money, bring people. There's obviously other things.
And why Gong? Why'd you call it Gong?
We didn't. Amit came up with the name Honeyfi, which I think he kind of brought from his like incubation before. Nobody could spell it, Honeyfi. It's like making something into honey. And I think after a few weeks, it became evident that if you want people to not even just like find us, just like even be able to get into the site after they tried it a few times, we're going to have to change it. And Gong is all salespeople, when they are successful, there's a boom, hit the gong with the success. So since the software is mostly for revenue professionals, it was a good name. It's one syllable. There is statistics that companies with one syllable are more successful, like Slack or Lyft or Apple. So Google is even one syllable. So I think you want to be on the successful side of DARs, like dynamic incubation software is probably not the best idea.
And how did you get the first client?
The first customer through the network. So it's actually the first one was a company called Acton out of California. Meet knew one of the people there, and he was like, "Hey, what do you think?" And he was like, he's so excited. So he said, "Yeah, let's try it out." He probably wasn't even the right buyer because usually we sell to, at the time, we had sold to mostly revenue professionals. I think this guy was more on the analytics side of the house, but he was like so passionate. He was like, "Yeah, let's bring it in, let's try it out." So I literally I opened a Gmail account and I kind of created my own cloud, software cloud, and I coded the first version so that I can give this person something they can play. It wasn't like real software; it was kind of pilot, but at least something they can play around with, and that was good. They liked it. It wasn't like them being a yes and no answer, but it was definitely helpful in the sense that they kind of were really excited about the idea.
And deep learning, there's so much data. So like, where's the epiphany moment where you're like, oh, okay, I hacked this kind of conversation and I found how to, bring those clients for that industry? Like, was there a moment where you said, oh, we're onto something? What was it?
So I think the way we looked at AI is a little bit strange or different than other people maybe. So I think back in 2015 when we started the company again, I took a deep learning course in Tel Aviv University, and it became obvious to me that this was like quote unquote the future, whatever that is, right? So the first thing I did is I went and bought NVIDIA stock because they were making all of the GPUs that drove all of this thing, and I bought them at 20, now they're 300, whatever. So I think that was like fun. And the next thing I did is send my entire family. So I go buy NVIDIA stock. This is the next thing, and they didn't buy it. So now they're kind of hating me. And the next thing is now you sort of have to figure out what do you do. And I think from a software perspective, we wanted to sort of make as much sense out of human conversations so that we can do something autonomously. So you speak with customers, the system is going to tell you what you need to know. And it was not applicable at the time. It wasn't available because everything is evolving, but we knew it's going to become better and better and better. So the first version of the software, we actually just used the third-party transcription service that only converted this conversation into words, and the only thing you could do is search them or tag other people in comments. So it was still a great collaboration tool, but very little understanding. And then after a year or so, we built our own transcription service, or a couple of years maybe. So that was like much, much better accuracy in terms of what you read, but it was still not a lot to understand. And then we built keyword search. So if anytime the customer says discount, you can type in discount and it finds it. And then we build topic understanding. So you can say, oh, they're talking about analytics, but so it's like more. And now we just launched literally 2022, we launched this idea of semantic search, which is basically you're telling me discount and the system's going to know if you say it's too expensive or I'm not sure I can approve it because of cost. But it takes time. It's a journey, right? It's a 7-year journey where we started with third-party transcription. Now it's 30 AI engineers who kind of do very deep understanding. So it's like one step at a time.
Amazing. And how much do you feel the fact that it's not your first rodeo is helping you?
Oh, a lot. I always recommend every entrepreneur. My first advice is start with a second company. This is so much better. This is amazing. So the thing is at Gong, we didn't do so many mistakes, and sometimes it comes across like bragging. It's like, oh, you're so perfect. You gotta have made mistakes. I'm like, no, dude. We're just I made so many mistakes in my previous company. I have a bag full of mistakes that there's not just all you can't even fit in more mistakes. It's I've made every mistake in the book twice and then a handful more. So I think it really helps by avoiding them.
Let's unpack that. What are the things what are the main pitfalls that you know by now that you've avoided this round?
First of all, you opened up a first company, which is the problem.
So there's so many. I think some are more generic, like hire the right people, insist on great talent. And other things, it's stuff everybody talks about it. By my previous company, we just hired wrong people, etc. But probably the main learning is in the beginning. Where in the beginning, my previous company, we had this Estee Lauder was a client and Chanel was a client, and sort of we said, no, cosmetics is too small, and we tried to be everything for everybody. So then we signed up American Express and Cisco, all great names, but nothing in common. So we're spreading way too thin, and we couldn't just generate enough interest in the market and I think sort of there's the Crossing the Chasm book, which tells you what to do. And first time around, I read it. I'm like, nah, I can do much better than that. I'm smarter than this Jeffrey guy. So I think now you learn that it actually makes sense. So when we started Gong, we were we're going to hyper focus. So we started with initially only selling to software companies in the United States who sell via video, mid-size, so 200 to 1,000 people. Probably a few more things in English, etc., etc. it was a very small market, maybe a few thousand companies. And then we expanded. But the fact that our first dozen customers were the same type basically allowed us to get number 14, 13, 14, 15 because they all knew each other. So somebody leaves a company in Israel and they go to the next company, which looks the same. They're like, oh, I need Gong. So that really allows us to blow. So focus on sort of like a small niche, start with a small niche, make them very, very successful. Initially, our customers loved us versus go very wide and try to do many things for many customers. Half of the startup companies I kind of come across still are, it's very hard to focus because they're like, oh, I really can help this guy and this guy, and this guy's my uncle and he really likes it.
And also, you
Focus
don't
is
know
not-
what to focus on.
Exactly. But the worst thing is trying to do many things or try to go after different market, different solutions. So just like toss a coin, pick one, and go after it for a while. I think at the time in my Webcollage days, which was my first company, if we had just focused on cosmetics, we would have been I don't know, yeah. But it's we probably would have had like 10 cosmetics customers, and then we would have gone to, I don't know, some other beauty stuff, and then maybe some shoes company or some apparel, whatever. Would have made it something that makes sense. And then at Webcollage, it took us like 3 or 4 years to go back to retail, and then we started everybody in retail. But that was like 3 years journey, which wasn't very helpful. So yeah, you got to learn from mistakes. Otherwise, I mean, you're going to make them obviously multiple times.
Do you think that on the entrepreneur side, like, it's really interesting on the focus, because like right now there's so much noise that the problem is, how to market yourself. It's easier to market something that you know what they do instead of making all the noise. But the thing is, do you think it's a psychology thing of being scared to close doors if you're making the wrong decision? Or do you think it's maybe a enjoyment thing because it may be boring doing one thing? Like the types of entrepreneurs, right? Like, because it's not like people don't know that, but it's hard to do, right?
It is psychology. I think there's a couple of things. First of all, you have to make a decision now. I don't know. There's lots of research that shows that making decisions is hard, right? You sort of make a lot of decisions, and then in the end, there's like a fatigue, like physical fatigue. It's like, I don't know, doing some chores or something. So decisions of saying somebody, not doing something is a hard decision, right? So it's the harder decision is, the more taxing it is. So I think that's one thing. I think the other thing is I don't recommend to people to be entrepreneurs. This is not fun. You always get no's, right? It's like what other industry you keep getting no's all the time, right? I mean, just like, I don't know. I don't remember my dating days. That was many years ago. I'm over 50, but I don't think I got as many no's as I got as an entrepreneur, right? So it's not fun, but at the same time, you're getting so many no's that if finally somebody says yes, you're like, oh, dude, I really want to have you as a customer. Whereas in fact, you want to sometimes say no to customers, even if they're like, because I hear you, this is what you need, and sorry, this is not what we do. We may do this later, or we may never do this, or I hear you and I'll think about it. But it's so hard because finally you get a yes and like, oh shit, I'm going to have to ask for another yes.
And the right people, like how do you not make the mistake of hiring the wrong people? Because that's really broad and it keeps being thrown around, but people keep repeating the mistake. Are there any rules of thumb or stuff that people can pay attention to?
Yeah, there's many things. First of all, don't hire people if you know they're not good, which kind of sounds idiotic, right? It's like, of course, I wouldn't hire somebody if I know they're not good. But most people are just like, yeah, I know this person's not so good, but I really need this person right now. And if I don't have it, I'm not going to blah, blah, blah. So it's like resist the temptations. Just like whatever. Just wait a little bit more. Find the right people. I can give you like numerous examples of specific things. We're like, oh, I might like hire, and then we hired somebody who was way better and nobody kind of remembered that we had other candidates. I can also tell you about 90% of my bad hires were in times where it was hard to find for that position. I was like, yeah, we're going to lower the bar, and then, screw it. Like 6 months later, everything was collapsing. So that's the first thing. Normally, and I think the other thing is set high expectations, just in general. Just, always prefer somebody's, like, I don't, like, Amit and I, it's kind of funny because we think the same way about this. Like, there isn't some such thing as overqualified. If you're looking for a salesperson, you get the best salesperson in the world. Maybe you're going to get the third best, but try for the best. And somebody's like, oh, I got 20 years experience. And some people will be like, well, I only need somebody with 5 years of experience. Well, if you get somebody better, get somebody better. I mean, this is all about being successful, especially in a startup company. Like, everything works against you, right? The market is against you. You don't have funding. You don't have the right people. You don't have the infrastructure. Maybe your idea sucks. Maybe your technology sucks. I don't know, like sort of. So the more you can reduce the risk, so to speak, by getting the right people underestimate that. So
the overqualification is usually because they may think that they can't keep them happy for a long while, right? So
or afford them.
Let's say affording them, but the risk is when they say overqualified, he's like, okay, he'll go to the biggest competitor and ask whatever. You know what I mean? Like, how do you keep them?
So I think affording is the easy one because I think it's much cheaper to hire a good person than to hire, just like in terms of the result you get, or just get somebody good better than two people who are less good. Usually, in most cases, right? Not in every case. In terms of retention, yes. I mean, this is a consideration. If somebody's overqualified, like you don't think they're going to hang around after a year, maybe. But like in many cases, like I was just chatting with my around our acquisitions. So we made like a couple of small acquisitions, like 3 people, 5 people, and all of the people we acquired are still here 3 or 4 years afterwards. Because you could think entrepreneurs, they're going to leave after a year, a couple, or whatever, and they like it here. It's they don't stay for the money. They're already vested. So I think it's all about then after you hire somebody, make sure that it's an environment they actually can be successful in, and they can enjoy work, and they can create enough challenges. Now, truthfully, if Steve Jobs came out of his grave and came over and said, "I want to be an engineer in Gong," I'd be like, yeah, maybe you're not going to enjoy it after a year. But I think as long as it's within the ballpark of what people are looking for, usually it's fine. I mean, if the environment makes sense, and I think it's going to be fine.
What other pitfalls to avoid?
People going after the market, accelerating too fast is one that I think I've done pretty badly in a previous company. Because like there's a life cycle to everything, right? It's like when you're a young couple, you probably don't need a 6-bedroom apartment. Maybe never, but whatever. So like one of the tempting things, I think now most people know it, but at the time it wasn't so obvious that, you start developing a product and it's like, oh, the product's fine. Let's hire 6 people and start selling it. And the idea is like, no, you want to first like maybe with one salesperson, see that it's successful, do it again. Then you want to start, I don't know, you go after a new continent or a new country. It's like, okay, try one person, see that it works, scale. Or you're going after a new vertical or a new type of customer or something. Always kind of start at the right pace and then step up, because what happens if you sort of speed up very quickly, prematurely, and it doesn't matter for what, even hiring engineers, right? You're just going to hire 20 engineers. It's all going to be a mess. Nobody's going to know what to do. People are going to step on each other. It's going to be a confusion. And then the worst thing happens, like suddenly there's a feeling of non-success in the company and people start leaving. And then if one person leaves, then we're like, oh, he's leaving. Why should I not leave? And so essentially it's not just not progressing, it's actually taking the whole area of the company backwards. So pacing everything is critical.
We're excited to be collaborating with the Israeli website CTech, owned by Kalkalist, Israel's leading business newspaper. CTech is the gateway of the Israeli high-tech to the tech world and vice versa. If you're not already a regular reader, we strongly recommend that you check out kalkalistech.com, CALCALISTECH.com, to stay up to date on all high-impact stories from the Israeli tech scene. And you were saying you don't recommend being an entrepreneur yet. This is your second time, and I'm guessing there's a very high chance that there's going to be a third. So I'm curious, why be an entrepreneur?
There are many benefits, right? I also don't necessarily recommend being a parent, right? I hope my kids don't listen to this, but it's still something. Well, first of all, it's social pressure, right? But then it's everybody in Israel has to be an entrepreneur. But the big benefits are, the drawbacks are you will probably work harder, you kind of struggle, you get lots of no's, and again, sort of like everything's on you, right? In normal position, you just come in the morning, you go in the afternoon. It's like, excuse my French here, fuck the business, I'm good. The nice thing about being an entrepreneur, again, if you care about it, you get a larger vote in how you shape the company. Conceptually, culture. So like Amit and myself are both like pretty straightforward people. We're like speak our mind. We're gonna, really like human in how we interact. So the whole company is like, okay, we have a corporate thing called no sugar. We're like in court, everybody's like, okay, this is what I think versus kind of sugar coating or politics or whatnot. So you get a lot of say in sort of how we, what you believe in as a human being is being in the company. I'll give you another example. Amit and I both believe in, I don't know, sort of call it equity these days. There's names for it, gender equality for that matter. So we put a lot of effort in things around gender equality, a number of women leaders and, kind of donations that we make and so on. We get a vote in this, right? If I were just an employee in a company, they might, it might have been a different type of work environment and kind of set of quote unquote values or operating principles that I need to sort of work with. yeah, I probably would have survived. You asked me if I was a bad employee. I don't think I was a bad employee, but you have to sort of tolerate stuff you don't necessarily personally like.
And that's mostly what you felt like you're tolerating, that the fact that you don't really have enough impact as an employee?
He does it now. He said he only has a little more say, which is really interesting for me to understand, because that's why being an entrepreneur, you have a little more say. That's it.
Yeah, I don't think I can. I have neither Amit and I can go back to the company and say, "Oh, by the way, from now on, we're all going to be blah blah blah," because people are going to either ignore us or laugh at us, or all of this. Like companies have values, be honest, or I'm going to now kind of be nasty for a second. Like Google used to have this "do no evil." I think at some stage they just turned it off because they realize it's not as simple not being evil. Even that thing is not so easy. So yeah, you get a little bit more say. I personally I can't just come back and say, hey, from now on, green planet is the most important thing, and the whole company is going to be after a green planet. This is just not what's.
And like you're saying a little, but do you have 50% of the say, or you're saying a little more say? That means you have less than that. In like, how much impact do you feel that you have on that?
We're a 10% executive team right now. So I think I have, 10%, like executive team runs the company. So I think Amit probably is the CEO. Amit is the CEO, my partner, right? So he's got obviously kind of first seat, captain. So he's got more say than others. But in general, we sort of, is there going to be, are we going to we just opened an office in Ireland, right? Are we going to open an office in Ireland, right? It's got lots of implications for the company, right? Yeah, I got to say the nice leader who leads HR is going to have a say. The nice gentleman who heads finance is going to have a say. So we all have a say. As a founder, you get like an extra share, so to speak. It's like, yes, I'm on the board, so I get, I don't use it, but I would get a veto right if people are going to be like, oh, we're going to start hiring, I don't know, really, really kind of jerks, right? I'm going to be like, yeah, I don't get this. This is not over my dead body kind of thing. But I don't think I exercise this right ever in Gong.
But I apologize for this, but like, just out of curiosity, it doesn't work like a real vote, right? It's not like the 10% vote, like there's a lot of psychology and dynamics and culture around it. So you probably have things that you have a say, which is like, ethical company culture and stuff like that. But like how much of a real say, because I find that a lot of entrepreneurs, it's more like enabling, right? It's enabling say. It's like the veto is very important. Okay. The yes, critical decisions. And in the middle, how much of a say do you feel that you have?
So when I said say, I meant mostly things around culture and these sort of things. I think what I try to do, I lead a product team at Gong. So this is my official role, 16-something people. I have a lot of say in my organization. This is, as the leader, hopefully I have some say there. Otherwise, why am I there? I can influence others, but definitely I would not go to the sales organization and be like, oh, you should hire more customer success managers. This would be,
But maybe they should.
Yeah, I could recommend. They would recommend to me. They come back to me. It's like, hey, I think we should develop this feature because it's going to help us. This and that. This is obviously part of the discussion I have with my peers. And I would go back to them and say, hey, I don't think you're doing this, and that. But I don't have a special say in other people's areas of responsibility. Probably the one thing I would probably say again is like being at the board. It's like if there's a total dysfunction in some area, I probably could be like, oh, do we have the right leader in place? And I think it's Amit's thing, but I'm obviously going to be part of that loop as being in the board of directors. But this did not happen,
We meet a lot of entrepreneurs and we always find that there's something, it's not like the money or the power. There's something passionate, some riddle in the person that makes a passion to open up a company, like something like to take that leap, which we agree it's difficult, but there is ROI, but it's not the ROI that people expect. So what was the thing that made you say, I want to take this challenge on?
So in all honesty, I think it's pure luck in the sense of I used to work at a company, as an employee at a company called Zappa Digital Arts and also called Gizmos, which people don't know so much today. It was mildly successful kind of startup back in the last century, previous century. And what was special about that company is the founders of a company called ICQ emanated from that company. So 4 people were like, oh, we're going to start ICQ. And these guys were building this chat engine, which many of the people in the audience might still have heard about. And they saw the fund was $300 or $400 million after like a couple of years. At the time, it was a huge exit. Now 400 million is like, okay, I'm buying groceries with this, but it was a huge thing at the time. And what was huge about it was just a freaking messaging app, right? And it was still astounding at the time, even for tech community. And what was even more astounding is, we were sitting next, in the next step. I actually came in just when they left, but I was kind of working with them a little bit, and they were just like normal people. They weren't like super like. I mean, they're all smart people, but like weren't Einsteins. They weren't like anything special. They're like three young kids, and whatever, one father. Then just like so, it gave everybody the aspirations to be like, well, if they can do it, we can all do it. So I think out of this company called Zaba Digital Arts, I think there's probably 20 startups started afterward because everybody's like, well, I'm as good. So I think in a way, when I left that company, it was kind of natural to say, hey, I got an idea, let's start something, and that started the previous company. And now when I did this previous company, it's like, okay, I can do this. So when I start a new company, this is going to be F reference. Again, I did take call for open positions in other leadership roles in other companies, but I also saw the benefit. The benefit is if you can raise money, then again, you get this extra vote and you kind of get to shape company in the way you want to. And I think it's fun. It's just more fun coming to work, to be honest with you. That's the main thing. This is the number one thing.
What kind of house did you grow up in? Like, were your parents or somebody around you an influence or something that inspired you down the road to take that path too?
I think so. I don't think we were like anything special. I mean, yeah, I got a computer at a relatively young age. I got addicted to it. I was like a very, very young programmer. I took like a programming job at some relatively, I don't know, end of ninth grade. But it was more like, this is sort of the typical engineer kind of thing. I think the most entrepreneurial thing I ever did was, I don't know, maybe sixth grade. They put me in the street to sort of sell fruit on a stand or something. But I don't think that's entrepreneurial. That's just like kid stuff. So no, I don't think it was something overly kind of putting me in this direction. Again, I went to the idea if I took a couple of job offers afterwards. So I didn't see myself as entrepreneurs or passion or anything else.
But were there any entrepreneurs around you growing up?
No, nothing special. I don't think you need to sort of have, I think, again, being an entrepreneur is, especially in Israel, which is like a startup friendly nation. I think anybody could do this. I don't think you need like a special, well, you need to sort of make the one thing you got to do is some sort of a willingness to give up your salary for a good chunk of time, because you're not going to start a company, without taking some sort of a vacation or I don't know something. I mean, you could, but in 9 out of 10 cases, you have to sort of have incubated for a while. If you're willing to do this, I got fortunate because the first time I did this was after I finished my master's degree, and I wasn't going to take a job anyway, so I was like, yeah, whatever, I'm just going to fool around a little bit. But I think it's harder if you sort of start having a family and whatnot. And now it's like, okay, how do I survive in this next year? Again, I got fortunate.
I really think he hacked it, like the aspiration thing. Like that's great luck being like with, Steve Vardy and the people that were super successful with ICQ and seeing them as normal human beings. Like they did a really good favor if everybody was brutal simplicity, showing that this is the podcast, by the way, that they're human beings with skill sets and, that would bring people, to try to hack it as well. You said they're not Einsteins, which is true for everybody. And if you're like smart and you had something to give them and worked with them for a minute and they said thank you, you do. That was like the biggest. That's like to give a metaphor to whoever doesn't know ICQ. It's sort of like a $1 billion exit. It was like Instagram to Facebook vibe. So there's being impactful there. That's a great aspiration. Like, do you have any advice of people getting those aspirations, like just meeting human beings that are so successful that look like gods, but they're just, my dad used to say Churchill also goes to the bathroom.
I think so. I didn't mean Churchill. I didn't mean Churchill for, I gotta assume that. We can always meet people. I mean, this is not the hard thing. I would actually, if somebody wants to be an entrepreneur, one of the things I typically recommend is, I call it the spiral method, is you sort of, if you want to know something, like when I need to learn what does speech to text technology look like, right? I didn't know shit about it. So what I did was like I picked the person who knew most about it because he happened to have worked in such a company 10 years earlier. And I'm like, what do you know? Like, well, I know X, Y, and Z. It's like, whatever. It's not a lot. Who else do you know that knows about it? He's like, oh, I know this Barak guy who kind of knows this stuff. Okay, I talked to Barak. It's like, okay, who do you know? And I started speaking to people, maybe 20, 30 people. And each time you learn something new, at some stage you stop learning and then you're kind of okay because now you're like, okay, as much as you can get from coffee conversations. So I think through this process, which I encourage everybody to go and just like learn through people, you also meet the people, you see that they're normal, you see like what is going to make them successful, not successful. Most people are willing to give you half an hour to an hour if you come with a very focused ask, right? If you're like, tell me more about your company, people are going to be like, well, I got other things to do. Or if you're like, I want to get general advice, people might be, is this a good use for my time? But if people come to you and say, I need half an hour because I want to understand X, Y, and Z, and you're an expert in this, most people, including very senior people, are going to be willing to give you this half hour at some stage.
You mentioned that you need to be willing to not make money for a while. And I'm sort of thinking to myself that a lot of people would be willing because they look at this as risk mitigation, because they think that at the end of the day, they're gambling on themselves and they think they can get a lot richer through a startup, even though the statistics would tell you that most of them are going to fail. Which leads me to sort of think, if a person is going down the entrepreneurial path with the main goal of getting rich, which, by the way, I believe a lot are, and then they're wrapping their narrative around some form of impact. But if there's a saying that for everything that, every answer that you give, there's like a good reason and a real reason. And I would say the real reason is probably money a lot of the time. And I'm wondering, what advice would you give to an authentic entrepreneur who will just tell you, I'm now looking for my way to get rich?
Probably not start a new company. Probably not start a new company. If you want to get rich, well, I wish I knew. I don't think there's a formula for this. Otherwise, everybody would have done it, right? I think in the tech scene, which I know more than others, usually you can become much richer by joining the right company at the right stage. So if you look at companies who sort of raised some money from good VCs, kind of, in sort of the VC jargon, it might be a seed round, A round, sort of like early stage, and you join them at that time and you get a nice package of stock or options or whatnot, and the company is successful. You still, like, if somebody's raised 2 rounds from a leading VC, they probably got a good chance, like one of 3 or 4, to be successful. You're not going to be a billionaire out of this, but you can get maybe, I don't know, if you're successful, maybe $1 million, which is actually a good thing. And then maybe after you get one of them, is not like rich, but it's like it gives you the economic safety that I think most people are looking for. And then once you get this, and the next one is a little bit easier because now we can take a little bit more risk. But that would be my advice. Because starting something is like just the likelihood of getting money and making something out of it is not huge. If you can raise money, you're probably going to be okay financially, because you can, in many cases, just sell the company for, even if it's unsuccessful, and get something out of it. So you're not going to lose money by just being in a company that has raised some money. In most cases, not in all cases.
Which is also something that I think most people in awe of the traditional forms of success aren't aware that a lot of the startups that are sold aren't actually such a success. They're just reaching a certain point and they're selling it for whatever they can get. And that still enables you to add that line of an exit to your CV.
Yeah, that's true. Most startups have not been successful. In my previous startup, I think we raised $70 million over the years. It was many years. So, and then we gave back the investors about half of it. So I think not like a huge failure, but I don't think anybody, like, especially not the first investors who it's got a waterfall thing. So the last investors always get their money back. So first investors, probably some of them might not have gotten most or all of their money back. And, it's part of being an investor. And you can't make money out of everything, right?
So let me ask you the backwards question of this same actually dilemma. Who would you recommend to start a startup? What do you need to hear to say you should do it? Usually
the best entrepreneurs I meet are people who are very focused. Meaning they kind of know what they need to get. They know how to execute well. They're like, okay, to achieve X, I need to do A, B, and C. Okay, so now I need to do the first customer. Now I need to get this. So they're not distracted by a lot of noise, because you're going to get tons of advice from all of different people. And we talked about customers are going to start asking you for stuff that you don't really do, and the investors are going to try to kind of throw you around and whatnot. So they typically tend to be pretty focused. They usually have some sort of expertise, either a domain expertise or product expertise, or some expertise that they can actually execute well, and passionate about being kind of driving things forward. It takes a lot of passion. You're going to get no's all day, and you got to keep pounding. So these are usually the better ones I meet. But I'm sure there's different types. I mean, there's probably nice people and jerks and smart and not so smart. I mean, it's all people, right? And what are your plans for Gong? Gong is growing fast. I mean, even in this economy, we're still growing fast. So the intent has been and still is to sort of grow it to be a very successful software company. So the likes of, again, not that we kind of care about specifics, the likes of a Checkpoint or I don't know, whatever it is, right? So that's the plan, keep growing. I think we're 1,200, maybe 1,300 people right now. But that's just number of people.
Would you want to sell or be a checkpoint?
Yeah, so growing, we have no intent in selling. Also, we raised money last time at the $7 billion valuation, and that obviously we're not going to sell the company for $7 billion. So now the number of companies who can write a check that's going to make us like seriously consider it there's a handful of those, and I don't think they're going to put a check. So I think once you raise at this valuation, typically what happens is you sort of go down the independent route. And at least for the time being, that's the general intent. People like working at Gong. I like working at Gong. We're having fun, so I think there's no reason to sell it.
Yeah, I think the fun is sort of sensed in the outer world, because as I started this conversation, like you guys are like the celebrities of the industry. It seems like you're able to really convey what's going on inside in a way that's bringing people to follow you.
It comes down to like how you can fool it, right? Brand is not something you create. Brand is something you reflect on reality, right? So I think one of our operating principles, we have 8 operating principles that we kind of define how we operate. And this is true. Like these are the things that we ask people in the company, what do you feel is working well? And then we kind of codified it. And one of the ones is enjoy the ride, which basically means we're here to have fun. This is not the fun that people talk about in tech sometimes in all of the kind of fun, have beers on the roof kind of thing. This is not the thing. We're not about, showing off fun or I don't know, taking a week-long vacation in Mexico, right? The thing is more like during work, during the time that you're in the office, we're trying to make sure people have fun. We're also going to do some specific fun stuff where we're shutting the company 2 days every quarter so that people can have time to relax. But the whole intent here is, you come to work, you should come to work next day with a smile, with something like, I come to a place where I enjoy working. This is where we spend most of our life, go to sleep for however many hours and then, take a shower, and a lot of the rest is work. So it should be fun. At least that's my belief, and that goes back to the previous point, which is devote. I think it's important for Amit and myself. This is a company that's a good place to people enjoy working at, and so we can try to make it that way.
Will your kids work at Gong when they grow up?
Oh, my daughter came in. We have those hackathons, which kind of, hackathons are, it's like the thing that engineers come in and kind of build stuff, whatever they feel like is cool. And I brought her in. She's 11 years old. And she was fascinated because she actually went group by group and like, what do you do? And they had to explain it to an 11-year-old. Sometimes people tell you, try to explain it to a kid. And this was the thing. They had to explain it to a kid.
There's the Einstein quote that if you can't explain it to, I think it's a 4-year-old, you don't understand it.
So they had to explain. It was funny, engineers struggling with, explaining it to an 11-year-old. And she's actually pretty kind of sharp in terms of, she surprised me at how kind of well she understands software, which is kind of pretty strange concept. And afterwards, she's like, oh, this was so awesome. Would I be able to work at Gong when I grow up? I'm like, yeah, could. So would love for this to happen. And then we can, of course, discuss what type of roles they are, engineer, product manager, designer.
What does she want to do at this stage?
She does not want to be a programmer. She doesn't feel like she should. Her brother is a very good programmer. So I think it's a little bit of, I don't want to be like him. She's an excellent designer, kind of, maybe a product manager. Her dad is a product manager, so maybe that. But she's kind of trying to figure it out. I think she's got a little bit of time at the age of 11.
Probably, yeah, at least like 2 years.
Yeah, exactly. She might be other things. Who knows?
What's your superpower?
What's my superpower? I can learn stuff relatively quickly. So like get into new domains or new things relatively quickly, which is helpful because sometimes you're like, oh, I need to look at this market and really kind of get the gist of it in relatively quickly. And I get people's mind very interestingly. So I can talk to somebody for an hour and I kind of get their thought process and how they think and how they operate, which is helpful both kind of for customers to understand what they really need, but also for people around me, which is like, okay, I hear you. This is what you're looking for. Maybe I can help you get there versus assume.
Practicality.
I don't have too many superpowers. This is more practical, right?
And your kryptonite?
I cannot work in a political environment. Like when in a few cases in my life where I had to sort of apply the superpower of being political, I usually failed miserably. I like to speak my mind. I actually have learned over the years to also kind of not speak my mind. Sometimes it helps because you don't want to be over blunt because we're all Israelis, and especially out of Israel, sometimes you want to kind of control this a little bit. But having to actually tell things not in the way they are is something I come home like frustrated. I'm going to kick a wall.
Maybe this was your drive for starting your own thing, like not having to play that game.
Good. Definitely part of it, right? Because in my own company, I kind of know that again, we've kind of structured in a way that minimizes this thing, and we kind of do our best to keep it that way, even with 1,300 people in the company. But definitely, it's not my strength. I'm horrible at it.
What's amazing is it happened again. Always the strength and weakness, the practicality and non-practicality as a weakness. We find that the superpower is always also the kryptonite. It's amazing. So like the thing that you're the best at, getting the gist of things really quickly and understanding and being practical, which is a great ability, right? And get to execute things is the weakness of not hearing. I'm going to say it worse than you, the bullshit. And the all-around non-practical way to go to things.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty natural that sort of people kind of orient around their strengths and not around their weaknesses. And yeah, I probably would not have been a successful. Let me tell you something. I probably would not have been successful as a politician. I definitely would not have been successful. I was one of the team members that started the school I mentioned before. And I couldn't even get elected to be the what do you call it, like the chairman of the board of the parents, whatever they call it in Hebrew. It's called Vadorim. I was leading this and I barely got elected. It's just I'm not good at just doing the thing that it takes to sort of drive that type of influence.
And if people want to find you, where can they reach you?
LinkedIn is usually easiest. I think I'm pretty responsive on LinkedIn. Otherwise, they can find me at home if they know where I live.
Thank you so much and lots of luck.
Thank you. Thanks for hosting me.
Real life.
Superpowers.
Up in the sky, it's a bird. It's a plane.
Gentlemen, we can rebuild him. We have the technology.
Real life.
Superpowers.